Hey guys, so the objective of this video is to solve a quadratic equation using square roots. So we already went through factoring a polynomial by greatest common factor and then grouping. And then we use that to solve. Now there's another way that we would solve, and it's using square roots. So for example, if I give you something like 2x squared equals 50. You'll notice that there's just an x squared here. So I can solve using my normal algebraic tools that I used in Algebra 1, solving like a 2x plus 4 equals 8. So the first step is always to isolate that x squared. So get that x squared alone. So I'm going to divide by 2. Okay? I get x squared equals 25. Now the opposite of squaring something is the square root. You might remember this from geometry with Pythagorean theorem, maybe some Algebra 1 stuff. We've seen this a lot, but I'm going to add in a little twist. So x equals the square root of 25. Now you might just say, okay, well, x equals 5. And you would be half correct. Now the trick with a square root of any number, okay, is asking what number, hashtag, times itself equals this, okay? So in this case, 5 times 5 is 25, but you're only half correct there, because 5 times 5 is 25. Yes, but we have to account for also the negative 5 times the negative 5, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So that is also 25. So there are two answers, and that's the big key with this. And you might have noticed, every time you see that there's an x squared there, you're generally going to have two answers to this. So x doesn't equal 5. It also could be negative 5. So we write it like that. Also, you might see x equals plus or minus 5. So positive 5 or a negative 5. So walking through some more examples here, okay, if x squared equals a, okay, then x could be the negative square root of a or just the square root of a, okay? So it means that there's a positive and a negative, okay? So here I have the x squared equals 4. So when I take the square root of both sides, you notice that there's a plus or minus, which means that x is either going to be 2, so shouldn't there 2 and negative 2. So there are two answers. When you see that plus or minus, that means that there's a positive answer and a negative answer. Same thing here. So I would get x squared equals 169. I would take the square root of 169. Square root of 169 is 13. So there's two answers, 13 and negative 13. The trick is always to write the positive and the negative. So again, the square root of 900, that's plus or minus 30. So it's 30 or negative 30. In this case, in this case, when I take the square root, x equals the square root of negative 121. You might say, 121, that's 11. What we have to account for is that negative sign. Now it's inside the square root. So if we have the square root of negative 121, you might say 11. Well, let's check it out. 11 times 11. Well, 11 times 11, that's a positive 121. Well, maybe it's negative 11 times negative 11. Nope, that's still positive 121. The only way I can get a negative 121 is a negative 11 times a positive 11. Now, Is that what the square root is asking? A number times itself? These numbers are not the same. You might look at them and say, oh, well, they're both 11. No, this is 11, this is negative 11. They're not the same number. I would rather have $11 in my pocket than owe $11. So, when you have a square root of a negative number, there are no real solutions. Okay? We can't do it. Okay? So, again, here I'm taking the square root of 144, which is positive. So it's a positive 12, so it's 12 or negative 12. And here for 7, again, I'm always isolating the variable first. So I have to divide by 4 first. So I get 100. Then I take the square root of both sides. Square root of 100, which is 10. So my answer is x equals 10 and negative 10. You might look at this and you go, fractions. Okay, that's actually the easy part. Square root of 25 over 36. Well, do you guys know the square root of 25? Yeah, it's 5. Do you know the square root of 36? Yeah, it's 6. So you leave it as a fraction. When you're square rooting or squaring a fraction, all you do is treat them separately. So you leave it as this. So x is actually 5/6 or negative 5/6. And 9, again, is that practicing isolating the square root. So again, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. So I'm going to get 125. Then I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides, like a normal math equation. And now I get x squared equals 25. Now I can do the square root. Once the x squared is isolated, I do the square root. And I get, should be plus or minus 5, or x equals 5, or negative 5. So, these are all practice problems where you're isolating the variable. So again, you want to add 10 on both sides, get x squared equals 36. Find the square root of 36, so you get x equals 6 or negative 6. In this case, I'm going to divide by 8. Again, x squared equals 4. I'm then going to find the square root of both sides and get x equals 2 or negative 2, or you can write it as plus or minus 2. For this one, I want to go through. Again, we're isolating the x squared. So we get 25 x squared equals 1. I divide by 25. So many people have the habit, you guys want to create a decimal. Decimals are not going to help you here. X squared equals 1/25. I then take the square root, leave it as a fraction. I then take the square root, and I would square root both top and bottom. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 25 is 5. So x is going to be 1/5 or negative 1/5. Those two answers there. So the rest of these are all about recognizing and solving, isolating that variable. Now, I often have trouble because of simple things like this. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. X squared equals 0. So many people think that there are no zeros everywhere. Okay, something has to equal something. Okay, 0 can't be an answer. I must do something wrong. 0 is a perfectly fine number. It's a number that's in math. We use it all the time. The square root of 0 is just 0. Now you might ask yourself, isn't there supposed to be a plus or minus? 0 is neither negative or positive. It's that middle number. So x just equals 0. It's just that one result. For 14, I add 8. X x squared equals, this is -1. Now when I do the square root, I have a negative number. There's no real solutions. Okay? And here, this is my normal one, where I'm going to add 32 equals 49. I then find the square root. Now it's a positive number, 7 or -7. I want to talk about word problems too, because a lot of people skip them. Again, the height of an acorn falling out of a tree is given by h equals -16 t squared plus b. The very important thing about this is the equation. If an acorn takes 1 second to fall to the ground, what is the value of b? Well, that 1 second represents time, which is t. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug it in. And it says fall to the ground. Fall to the ground means that my h is 0. And it's asking for what is the value of b. So b is the only thing that I'm not going to know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug it in. 0 equals -16 times 1 squared plus b. Now I'm just solving. Okay? The trick is to plug in what you know and then solve. 1 squared is 1. -16 times 1 is -16. Now I'm going to solve for b by adding 16 on both sides. So b equals 16. That means, okay, that b would be 16 in here. That's, I didn't have to find the square root at all. Okay, I just had to plug in what I knew. In the same thing, I'm going to solve for something that I know. I'm going to have to plug something in. So the very important thing here is the equation. Okay, and the height of the skydiver jumping out of the airplane is given by blah. How long will it take? That means I'm solving for time. The skydiver to reach the ground, which means h equals 0. So I'm going to plug that in. I am then going to solve for t. -3200 equals -16 t squared. Negatives are very important. Need to keep those signs. We're going to divide by -16. I got t squared equals negative becomes positive, becomes 200. Now I'm going to find the square root. Now you might be asking yourself, I don't know the square root of 200. It says round to the nearest tenth of a second, which means we're not going to have a good number for this. So we're going to have to take our calculator and plug it in. What you should find is that t is around 14.3 seconds. Okay? Now, you also might be asking yourself, well, every time I took the square root, it could be -14.3 seconds, right? Well, we're in a real life situation here. Can I go backwards in time? I'm going to discount that one. And I'm just going to go with the positive. So oftentimes when we're dealing with real life situations, we're just going to go with the positive. And I also wanted to show you this. It relates solving by using the square roots and that graphing using the vertex form. So you see that even graphing, I still come up with the same results. This is my k, so it just moved down 3, and all we're doing is looking for where it crosses. And we get the same result as if we solve using square roots. You just got to remember that there's 2 answers for quadratics. And there's more examples of this where, okay, I have a square root of a negative. Well, there's no real number that's going to be a square root of a negative. Well, again, if I use my k, this plus 9 is moved up 9, which means it's not going to cross the x-axis. There's no roots. While here, if I cancel out the 9, the square root of 0, it means that k is not moved anywhere. It's right at the origin. It's not moving anywhere. And we can solve this using the same thing. So we're going to get negative 5 and 5. It's going to be here and here. And then we can sketch the graph. This is my k value. That's down 25. It's like this. All right. So that is this function graphed and solved using square roots. How many solutions does this x squared equals negative 36? Well, x would be the square root of negative 36. And you can't find the square root of a negative. Okay? So that is no solutions. Okay? So this means that it won't cross the x-axis. Okay? And it means that it's going to be the square root of a negative. So in terms of the graph, it's not going to cross the axis. And in terms of the square root, it's going to be a square root of a negative. So please take the time to make sure that you write down any questions you have and complete the practice C, both sides, both the practice, the skills piece, and the word problems. Thank you.